Today we're going to talk about this is a topic that a lot of people don't like to hear about never stopping the practice of law once you start. And a lot of people believe that you can actually stop the practice of law. And for the most part, once you stop the practice of law, it becomes very difficult to get back into the practice of law. Now, this is a few weeks, and certainly people can stop longer than that, even months. But the longer you stop practicing law, the harder it is to get into it. And get back into it. In most instances, I've seen when someone stops practicing law for any length of time, longer than a month or two, they generally have a very difficult time getting back into the practice of law. And if they do get back, they're typically not hired at the same caliber of jobs they could have been hired in had they not left. So this is a fairly important topic. It's just a rule in the legal profession. It was something that I learned when someone taught me fairly quickly when I started. When I was after a clerkship, when I took some time off, someone told me about this, and it is an important topic. And so after this presentation, I'll also be taking questions, which is my favorite part of the week, and I'll answer questions about any topics that anyone has related to practicing law or finding a position and so forth. Okay, so a lot of attorneys really dream about taking time off in the practice law. As a matter of fact, most of them do. And especially when you're in the thick and the grind and you're working very hard, and you may think about going somewhere and decompressing and getting perspective and taking a break and then coming back, often just on your own terms. And I've seen a lot of attorneys do this, leave, but very few of them end up coming back. And lawyers often do quit their jobs, and many times they do so from coming from very prestigious law firms. And they do things like become ski instructors, they travel, they start bakeries, write novels, and do all those sorts of things. And several attorneys that have actually worked for me have done that. And I see resumes of attorneys that do these sorts of things almost on a daily basis. And it's often the ones that it's most surprising who do it are the ones that have the best backgrounds. So it's most often the people with the best backgrounds that will have the confidence to believe that they can do this. And that's often also the ones I'm most concerned about, because they're frequently making a serious career mistake. And if you follow this idea, and I hate to be the one to break this news, it can be very risky, and it can hurt you quite a bit. And while you may have a lot of fun and actually become a better person, the problem is that the legal profession, for whatever reason, and I'll talk about some of the reasons today, but the legal profession doesn't respect people that take too much time off, and I think it should. I know lots of people that have gone on retreats and for a month or longer and had really great experiences and made them better people. But unfortunately, the legal profession does not look that kindly upon this, and they actually, it's a negative thing. And your odds of getting back into a really good firm once you do something like this are pretty slim. But there are reasons that you can leave, of course. People have illnesses, and there's no people. Obviously, firms do not have a lot of issues with if you have to take care of a relative. Some people take time off to have children, and even several years off, and are welcome back. Sometimes there's a death of a family member, and you may need to take care of your family for the most part. And I'm just qualifying that. If you do leave for more than your allotted vacation time, then you're in a little bit of trouble. And you can't do it. And the problem is especially if you're leaving a very prestigious firm, it's very difficult to come back. And I hate being the one to tell you this, because I think that it's unfair, because it makes you feel like almost like you're a slave and you can't leave. And if you do leave, but this is just the way it is. And I do want to say right at the start that what I'm talking about today is there are people that are at the end of their ropes, and I'll probably hear some questions from some people like that this week. And there's people that just have had it. They really need to. They have health issues from working all the time in office buildings and having to be in an office or working crazy hours. They're dealing with very unhealthy people. They're not happy practicing law, and there's no reason that anybody should be in that situation. And sometimes you can get a different perspective on things, and with therapy and with talking to people and with mentors and things, with coming to webinars like this consistently is a very good thing to do, and listening and reading the things that I've written. But at the most part, if you are at the end of your rope, then you do need to think about doing something else oftentimes. And that's just the way it is. And it doesn't necessarily mean changing your practice setting. Sometimes it just means working in a different type of firm in a different area of the country. So what I'm talking about is Today, I'm really talking to people that believe that they're entitled to a break. They've worked really hard in their law firms and they're exhausted and they just feel like they need to do something else for a while and take some time off. And this is, unfortunately, this sort of thinking process is not something that is respected by most firms. And it's not something that partners in major firms do. It's not, it just doesn't happen. It may happen, but not very often. And it's not something that can help you get ahead. So I want you to think about some of the reasons why it's a bad idea to take an extended leave, absent a major life event, and then I'm going to tell you how law firms will evaluate you if you're in the middle of a leave, if you've lost a job and you've been unemployed for a while, and how they think about that and what you should do. So I hope this is a very important topic because a lot of people don't necessarily think about this and they make very rash decisions. And there's just all these rules in the legal profession that people don't understand. And this is one of them. So I'm going to talk today about middle class values and how they relate to this law firm hiatus issue. And people hate it. Like when you talk about class issues, I don't know why it is, but every time I write about these class issues or talk about them, people always try to take it out of the things I write, but this one, I guess it made it in. And one of the things is that the law really is a middle class institution and the values are very middle class. And it's one of the reasons because that people really think it's a bad thing many times to take a leave of absence. And basically people that are middle class believe that they need to work. And I guess that's one of the ideas, and that not working is a bad thing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the future, but almost all attorneys are middle class. There's nothing wrong with being middle class. Some of them are upper class, but very few. But the idea of being middle class is the kind of thing that lawyers do. And they have mortgages and car payments, and they're expected to families to support, and they're expected to consistently work hard their entire career. And then they're expected to be dependent upon their paychecks, save part of their paycheck for retirement in order to maintain a certain lifestyle. And that's just how lawyers operate. And they try to do the best they can in terms of the neighborhoods they live in, and the cars they drive, and the schools they send their kids to, and the vacations they take every year, and so forth. So there's nothing wrong with that, and it's just the way it is. But the idea is most attorneys do not have the luxury of simply picking up and leaving the profession. Even partners in major firms, many of them don't. And it's just the way it is. Give me 1 second, sorry. Okay, the idea is when you're paying off student loans, for example, a lot of the student loans that attorneys have these days are $200,000 and more. When you're paying off student loans and so forth like that, it's clear that a lot of attorneys, when you combine that with houses and car payments and so forth, that most attorneys are pretty highly leveraged and they need to work. And an additional thing is that the whole idea of being middle class is going and this is not a criticism in any form of the way, it's just the way it works in our country, is that people are trying to work harder and go and do more than the people that became ahead of them before them, and they don't rest as much. They work harder. They want to work hard and get ahead. And so the idea that someone would choose not to work is something that most attorneys and law firm managers often can't wrap their heads around. And the people that don't work are typically your very lower class people that get government, whatever. And then your upper class people that, are just independently wealthy and have lots of money and stuff. So the idea that if you would walk away and that you can do things differently and you don't need to work is something that I think a lot of people inside of law firms don't necessarily understand. When you take time off like that, you immediately show that you're not part of their group and you're different. And I'm just looking for explanations here of why that is, and I think this is one of them. And the thing is because people look at you should be working, and they all work, and they've always worked and not taken a lot of time off. Most of the reasons that people give for take time off don't work for them. The way that most law firms think about you if you've taken a lot of time off is you either were fired, you couldn't get a job, you have psychological issues. The big one is you're just not committed, to the practice of law, or these kind of values that say you have to work all the time, or you're unskilled or unmotivated and that sort of thing. And I don't like saying this stuff because it's not nice, but I'm just parroting back the way that law firms, in my experience, have typically, I believe, think about this. And the idea of this middle class values, the idea of that working for others and working hard for others and confers value on the person in the eyes of the world. And then if you take time off and you're not doing that, you're no longer as valuable. And because attorneys don't want to be judged poorly by others, most would never take significant time off from the practice of law. And I, frankly, this kind of class-based analysis also makes me uncomfortable because these are not things that are necessarily the nicest things to say to people. And if you point out where you are in the system, but it's just how people associate taking time off. And if you take upper and lower classes, the upper and lower classes are typically, they always say that they're very much more alike than the middle class is like the upper class, or the upper class, or the middle class is like the lower class. The upper class and lower class often don't work. Upper and lower classes typically don't care as much about what other people think of them. This is where, when you have the hardest drugs, they're often confined to the upper and middle, lower classes when it starts. And then the middle class, which most attorneys, myself included, are part of, is they're concerned with what others think of them. They're concerned with where they went to college or law school, their cars, their neighborhoods, and what their kids are doing, and all that sort of thing. And that's just a certain type of thought process they have. And then lawyers are, for the most part, middle class, and they work for people that have big businesses, and they're almost like they that's what they do. And most of them, and they have a lot of concern for doing that. And so the last thing in the world someone would expect of them is to get up and leave the practice of law. So you're, as an attorney, expected to buy into this whole idea that you're working, you're trying to support yourself, you're trying to do the best you can, and you're relying upon the firm. And if you show that, and you show that you're dependent on that for your self-worth and also for money and so forth, then law firms are much more likely to like you. If you are opposite of that, and you are too independent, and you don't care, and you don't buy into that, then that means the law firm can't necessarily control you. You're not controlled by the value system. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing to be controlled by that value system by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm just telling you the thought process and why it can hurt you. So here's some of the reasons that you shouldn't leave. And this is the meat of the presentation now. The first thing is, future firms are going to think you probably got fired. Sooner or later, you're going to want to also return to the practice of law. And if you take time off, and you're going to want to do something, and you're going to think that you miss the respectability or the perks, or you want to start a family, or you want to provide better for your family than you've been doing, and you have time off. And the problem is, and I see people like this all the time. I see people sometimes that have been at major firms, and then they go home for some reason or another, and they stay there 2 or 3 years and don't work, and then they want to go back. I was talking to a guy the other day that he'd been at a major firm for 6 or 7 years, and then he got the opportunity to go back and run some business for his family, and somewhere in I don't know, Vermont or Maine or something, some very successful business doing, I don't know, like a giant hotel or something. And then he wanted to go back to the practice of law, and people were just, no, you have this giant business. Why would you possibly want to do that? And he was just helping his family with a business, like close it down or something. But he didn't have a lot of luck. The problem is, law firms have a lot of people that are coming in for most jobs, and they have a lot of people to choose from. So if you're not working currently, then the law firm is generally going to assume that you must have gotten fired, or even if they don't think that, they're going to be more likely to hire someone that's currently employed, all things considered. That doesn't mean you can't get employed, but it does mean when you're looking at major markets, especially, like, if the thing to always think about is, when you're taking time off, is if you want to go back and get a job in a market, Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or in one of these bigger tech, Houston, most of those law firms, when they have openings, are going to have lots of applicants. And so what they do is they weed through all those applicants, and if they find things wrong with them, then they eliminate them, and they choose the ones that don't have things that are suspicious. And so if you have time off, that's one of the things that's going to hurt you compared to other applicants. And so you're more likely to be eliminated because you look like you're not buying into this whole system. But you can certainly work in smaller markets where there's a lot of demand for people like you. The idea also is that sometimes law firms will think you might have had psychological issues if you left. And I think that's crazy, but it's actually often true. People often do leave because of psychological reasons. And this kind of middle class value of expecting you to work and things is so ingrained, and lawyers inside of law firms take their job so seriously that they really do believe that there must be something wrong with you if you've left and gone and just taken time off and done nothing. So they do often suspect you have psychological issues. And many times in my experience, and it's not by any stretch of the imagination, even 25% of the people, but a good percentage, probably 15% of the people that, or maybe even 20, that take extended time off, we're having kind of psychological issues. And sometimes usually it's caused by the firm. Sometimes it's because of other things, but it's almost always caused by the firm. And then that's obviously not a good fit. And then the other thing is lawyers will assume that practicing law is not your kind of all-consuming focus and not what you want to do. And lawyers are just very competitive by nature. And they compete from they're trying to get into the best schools to getting the best grades to getting the best jobs. They're very concerned about who gets the best jobs and who makes the most money. And then they get the jobs and they want to get the best assignments. And then they want to get the biggest clients when they become partners. And then they want to compete to get a bigger share of the profit. So there's this whole kind of very competitive nature that they're built into the way attorneys think about things. And in order to thrive in these environments, a lawyer really needs to care, and they should be positioning themselves about how other people see them, which again is something I hate saying because it just sounds so stupid, but it's true. And so if you drop out of the race, this is going to show others that you really don't care about winning anymore. And then this lack of competitive edge is considered a detriment by firms. And one thing I'll say is I'm always amazed because I talk to attorneys all day, every day. And when I talk to attorneys, I'm always very astonished at the things that they get in trouble for. The lawyers are so competitive with each other and they're looking to discredit each other so much that the reasons, I'll just give you three examples from very big firms. A very big firm in a conservative state in the Northeast and market fired a partner because he came to work with rips in his jeans. His jeans were ripped and you could see his underpants. I guess it's just insane. But that got him in trouble. I know another firm that fired a partner because they said he drank too much at a Christmas party. Or no, they didn't fire him, but they basically stopped giving him work. He was a service partner because they said he drank too much at a Christmas party and he was just too jovial and friendly with some people, which that's fine, but I was in New York. And then I know another firm, I'm just trying to think of some other examples here, but I'm just telling you this kind of stuff, another woman that when she tried to make partner in a law firm, or when she was up for partner, they told her they weren't making partner because she told someone she didn't have time to do an assignment a couple of years ago. This is how competitive lawyers are with each other. So if you take too much time off, that's just one other thing that in this super competitive environment, and not all law firms are this competitive, by the way, but a lot of them are, where the stakes are very high. It can hurt you. If you eliminate yourself from competition and you're not playing by these rules, then you're sending the message that the law is not your number one priority, and you don't care as much. And it may not be, and there's no reason it should be. I mean, I'm not advocating for this one way or another. But the reason the lawyers think this way with each other, I think, is that the best law firms want attorneys that are really always on the ball for their clients, always very concerned about what the client needs, and providing the absolute best client service. So everything that you do and the way you react to the legal profession, the way you react to your law firm and so forth will often show the kind of attorney you would be with your clients. And so there's just the higher up you go in the legal profession, the more a lot of this stuff is often emphasized. And it's not like that in every great firm. I'm not certainly saying it, but many times it is, and most times it is. And then a law firm may talk about how an environment is collegial and it's got a great quality. At the same time, those are often the most competitive environments. The ones that have the reduced hours are often the ones that, where when you're working, your work better be really freaking good. And the ones that are collegial environments where everyone's really nice to each other, oftentimes there's a lot of hostility and stuff beneath the surface that's not spoken. I don't know what it's called, passive aggressiveness and stuff. So it's just, you have to be very careful. But law firms really want to hire people that are dedicated, and if you don't look dedicated, that can hurt you. Another thing is that, and there's actually a lot of truth to this, but if you take too much time off, the law firms will assume that your skills have deteriorated, and having a really good legal mind is much like being an athlete. If you don't maintain your legal mind, it could atrophy and wither away. It needs to be constantly utilized and challenged. And so whatever you're doing when you take time off, if it's not the same kind of work you left behind, then it could be dulling and not sharpening your mind. And attorneys continue developing. And every day you're at work, you're becoming a better and better attorney. And then if you walk away from that, depending, then a lot of those skills will go away. And law firms will just see it. I'm sure that you've met people that you may have known in the past when you were in different parts of your life, and you go back and you meet them, and you realize that they're just not up to par. And I had that experience not too long ago. It's actually not a funny story, but went to a small town in the Midwest, and I went into a grocery store, and I couldn't believe just how slowly everybody was moving. It was like things were going at 15% speed or something. And so it's just, you look at different environments, and people move at different speeds and think at different speeds, and people do things at different speeds. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you will continue advancing when you're in a fit firm. And if you go away for a long period of time, your skills may deteriorate. And sitting at home and watching television does not make you a better attorney. Time off and reflection and stuff certainly does, but your intellectual skills can deteriorate, and law firms take that seriously. And then here's some of the things that law firms will look at. So I'm assuming that people that are watching this, if you're not very upset at this point, which I would be by what some of the stuff I've said, would probably want to know how the law firms how they'll consider you. Because I get people jobs all the time that are taking extended leaves, probably, I don't know, once a week, or once every couple of weeks. So it's not as if you're unemployable, but it makes it much more difficult. So the first thing that law firms are going to think about is whether or not they accept the reasons that you've given for leaving. And they'll always ask. They'll always want to know why you've taken time off, and they'll be concerned. They'll be curious about that. And so generally, the best reasons you can give are things that are beyond your control and don't affect your day-to-day commitment of being an attorney. An example would be, like I talked about earlier, the death of someone in the family, and that sort of thing. You'll have to be able to address those. You'll have to explain to the firm that you weren't fired. You'll have to come across as looking very focused and that you're committed. The law firm will have to believe that your skills are fresh and up to date. And then if you pass that test, then you'll be back in the legal profession. The thing is that partners have family members die all the time. Partners have things that happen, and they don't always leave. So you have to ask yourself, if I was a partner in a law firm, would I do the same thing? Would I take all this time off? And in most cases, partners wouldn't. So you have to think about really what happened at that point, and did you not want to practice law and so forth, and what are these reasons? And so you have to come up with reasons that many times are good. And sometimes there's great reasons. Like I know people that have had to move to very small markets where you couldn't necessarily work remotely because of a family member or something happening, and couldn't work. I know people that had to move overseas for whatever reason. And there's all sorts of things that can happen. And then of course, serious illnesses and sicknesses and stuff can definitely be something as well. And then the next thing is that law firms will always ask if you're going to be likely to be stable in your next job. They're going to want to think about how are you likely to be stable? And if you just left your firm and then you're not going back to the same firm, that indicates that there may be some instability. And at the same time, if you practice for a long time and amass a strong record of very consistent achievement, meaning you worked for someplace for several years and did very well there, then a law firm would be smart hiring you. And because sometimes people just make mistakes. I've been in situations where all the time where people that have worked for me have made very serious mistakes, and you have to decide if you're going to look the other way sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with looking the other way and giving people a free pass now and then. But at the same time, you base those passes on the existence of a strong record prior to the mistake. So, and you can just demonstrate stability in other ways. You can show that you've never changed jobs, and that's one way. You can also demonstrate a commitment to the legal profession by having done legal related work while you've been out, like writing about your practice area and that sort of thing, taking classes and CLEs, and those could all be helpful. One of the other things I just wanted to bring up, and I don't know why I haven't at this point, but taking time off to have kids and want to go back. That almost always welcome. And I would say that women that do that actually have all things considered, a better chance of getting a job than they're just as employable as someone that's currently working. So I don't I think that law firms respect that and they are willing to, so as a sign of stability, because, and they know that hiring women that have taken time off to have children is a smart move because they're likely to also, they need to raise their children or take care of them and they need a job and all those sorts of things. So that's one thing where I don't see a lot of problems. And how much time is too much time? There's all sorts of schools of thought on that, but even a couple of years is generally fine. And sometimes people even wait till their kids are 5 or 6 in school. But if a firm thinks you'll be stable in the future, then the odds you can get another chance. And then the other thing is your experience. The legal market is about supply and demand. If the law firm believes that you have very good experience, then, and there's not a lot of people like you, then they're willing to overlook this stuff. Law firms are businesses. Right now, there's certain practice areas that are very much in demand. If you were, for example, trust and estates is in demand. So if you were a trust and estates attorney 2 or 3 years ago and took time off and you suddenly want to come back, there's enough demand that law firms will be like, you know what, I don't care. Like, I'm willing to bring this person back. So law firms are willing to take chances when they believe that you're likely to, when they need someone like you, because they're businesses and they'll overlook it. What I'm talking about in terms of most of the problems are when you're in a very competitive practice area like litigation or another one where there's a lot of people competing for the same jobs. Then taking time off can be a problem. But sometimes if you have very specialized skills, when you're taking time off, the law firm literally will not care because they need you, and that's the way it goes. And then the other thing is your past experience, that the quality of the firm you were at before can make a big difference. Litigators trained at the best firms, or finance and corporate, and are going to, even after extended periods of absence, can often get a lot of interest in different markets. And the big thing though is the market you're looking at. So when you look at very sophisticated and well-developed markets where there's a lot of competition for the same jobs. So markets like, again, like I said before, New York and Los Angeles and Bay Area, San Francisco in particular, and Miami, and the other kind of markets like that a lot of people want to work in, Austin, Texas, then law firms can afford to be very discriminating in those markets. They have the ability to say, you know what, like, we're getting all these applicants for this job, and we prefer to stick with this person because they don't have this gap. But if you look at smaller markets, like if you decide I'm going to look at, in a smaller market would be maybe Las Vegas or Salt Lake City or just Phoenix, and then law firms are going to be like, wow, this person looks great, I'm interested in them, and they're hard to find, and they're more likely to bring you in. So one of my big pieces of job search advice to everybody, and if you're one of my candidates on this call, I'm sure you, even this week, got texts from me and emails about the importance of looking at multiple markets. That's very important. And then sometimes your educational qualifications can make a difference too. Young attorneys always think their law school is very important, but honestly, when you get out more than a few years, there's a lot of things that are more important than your law school, meaning your practice area, the quality of firm you're with, or those sorts of things, and the amount of business you get when you're a partner. But if you have really good qualifications, and there's certain schools that just continue to open doors, like Yale's one of them, and Stanford, and Chicago, and Harvard, and different types of schools like that. So those can continually open doors for people. And if you have very good educational qualifications, then law firms may look at you a little bit differently if you took time off, and because they want to get a return on their investment, and frankly, having attorneys that went to certain law schools, it helps them, it helps the law firm, it helps them, other attorneys that have gone to similar law schools. So there's a whole kind of psychology behind law firms will maybe bring people in, even if you don't have necessarily the best record at the moment. Because you took in a lot of time off, good law school can make a difference when you're younger. And just another thing I just wanted to bring up, because I know that Frank didn't go to the best law schools, but I just think that success in that setting translates into success in environment. I think that being very good at the process is about all these different things: your drive, motivation, your insight, your ability to assert yourself, all these things that don't necessarily an academic, but at the same time, the you show your ability to understand complex problems and to write well, and those are skills that an attorney that can definitely help out. But I just have a funny thing I'm saying here, but it just says we often see the best and brightest attorneys come from academic institutions, anti-establishment points of view, getting overshadowed by attorneys from secondary law schools who may not be intelligent but have a distinction with the legal practice and do not the arrogance that they somehow are above the rules of the law firm. And that's actually, I like that point. And the reason I like it is because I see a lot of attorneys get into trouble because they think that the most important thing is their law school, when it's all about the work you do, how hard you work, your insight, and all these other things, and think their law school is a little badge of honor that seriously can often get themselves in. Okay, this is conclusions here that you're taking a risk. You leave the practice of law period of time. It certainly can work, and it's not always a bad, but it is something you need to think about. And the idea is that it doesn't connote or doesn't communicate the sort of commitment that most law firms want to see. If you should definitely have very for doing, or if you do it, when you come back and realize if you have best jobs, you may not be able to in your existing market, large market, if it's a very and that sort of thing. But frankly, in time, it can be a really good thing, and for a lot of attorneys, and can really make you a better attorney. But at the time, there's a cost to it, and the cost is getting back into quality law firms. Okay, so I'm going to take a quick 1.5 minute, about 90 seconds, and then I will come back and answer all the questions. Give me one here. Question. They're great questions. I love this is the week. I love hearing what people are thinking and what is important for the things that are important. They're usually really good questions, and so I love questions you have. The better. I really appreciate them. I'm a lower tier 14 student above median who struck out during OCI. Okay, I had a callbacks and none of them panned out. This month, I finally managed to land a summer position in a 15-20 person law firm, smaller market. All right, great job. Outside my target market. The pay is about half as much, but I'll be doing commercial work for smaller clients. I'm sorry, this. Okay. Be able to transition to a position. Should I focus my search on getting a clerkship, or could I possibly make the transition during a 3L? I need to appreciate it. Okay, that's a great question. So there's several questions here. So the first is the first thing I want to recommend. You got a summer associate, awesome. So great job getting a summer associate job. So that's fantastic. What you need is, and this is my advice for everyone that's on this call that has a associate job, is you need to go in to your summer associate job, and if you want to succeed there, you need to work the most hours and build the most hours of anyone in your class. You need to be enthusiastic. You need to be grateful, solicitous work, meaning ask people for work, and then you need to proofread all work. You need to work slow. Basically, the best job you can. It does. If that summer job is with a firm that you don't think is that great, that's what you got. Don't worry about it. You need to just work the best you can, because every now will have results later. Attorneys you will be references, all sorts of things. So do not worry that you're making half of what other people. The other thing I want to say that's important is that as a young attorney, is to get experience. Like the money you're making now. So if you're 23, you will be practicing law. So 23 to 24-year-old will be practicing into your 80s. And this is how long most people practice, at least. So what on earth are you worried about a few $1,000s a week or whatever at this point in your career, or that you do not worry about money when you're young? You be thankful that you're getting experience. And that's the most important thing, because you're learning a craft right now, and you're learning, and these people are inviting you into their law firm to teach you something. So you should be very grateful that you have this opportunity. That's a major opportunity, and you almost didn't get something, but you finally got it, and that's great. And you learn your lesson. Now, I would also think about what you did in your callbacks that may not have worked, and then I would also think about what you could do in your next job that would make you more, or in your next interviews that would make you more effective. But your job is to get experience. You shouldn't worry if you don't have the best paying job. The legal career is a long road. It's a long race, and you're going to be doing this for a long time. So just because you're not starting the race in the front doesn't mean you're not going to win. This is these thought processes. Oh, sorry, here my screen's up. Look at that. Let me see here. Let me fix my camera again. Let me see here. Anyway, so just because you're not winning, I'm trying to find my camera name here. Let's see, Hudley. Just because you're not winning the race when you start, that does not mean that you're not going to win over the long term. So that's what I would say. So your job is really to get as much experience as you can when you start, and not worry necessarily about the type of what's happening to you initially. And so many people make this mistake. They're bitter at a great summer associate job offer. They're bitter that the best firm. It doesn't matter. This is a long race. So do the best you can. And then your job, and kiss these people's behinds, because you need to get an offer that's even worse. And you just keep in mind that if you do then you're going to get experience. And other people will not necessarily have experience. And just because it's not the most prestigious firm doesn't mean there's not good things about it. These attorneys may be making millions of dollars a year in some sort of, you don't know. There's all these people who can help you. So next question is, should I do a clerkship? And yes, you should try to do a clerkship. You should try, and you should apply all over the country when you can, because a federal clerkship will lead the federal district court clerkship or trial work. District court will lead to better jobs. So after you do your clerkship, you can certainly transition to another firm or go back to your existing one. But doing a clerkship is a very smart thing. If you're not getting a job in the firm, it would be yes. Clerkships also better attorney when you start, because clerkship you'll be working with a judge right when you start, and the judge will basically be teaching you. You'll be in a judgmental atmosphere where you'll have to improve your writing skills and to an all-around better attorney. It could be a very smart thing from you, and I would recommend. Now, if you can't do it, you can always go back to your firm. And then the other question you asked is, can I make a transition as a 3L, get another job? You can. So if you get an offer, you can, then law firms also interview 3L. So you can still get an interview, get interviews with large law as a 3L, not a problem. You can do that, and you can frankly get another job until you accept your existing job, until you start your new job. So you definitely have to do that. Do the best you can as a summer associate. Then make sure you get, and not care about the pay you're getting. Do not care. Do not worry about it. Just soak up experience, because a lot of people aren't doing it. So what you learn now will help you. And look at me. I talk about my experience, and I've been law in a long time. So the experience is useful, and you will be able to draw on it the rest of your career. So you need to do whatever you can. And then, yes, much better firm if you do a federal clerkship now than you could if you didn't. And then yes, you can still get interviews. Okay. As many questions as people have, please ask them, because these are very helpful for other people. So even if you don't, questions that important, someone that's on the call can often really benefit from this. And if you're not nervous, questions. Okay, if you've taken a practice from a law firm or traditional legal environment and instead engaged in contract work for different firms and contractor, is this looked upon disfavorably? So the big thing with law firms is and I come back to this, but they're always asking the following question: can you do the job long term? These are the questions that I ask. First one is, can you do the job? And then obviously, even if working as a contract worker, that you probably can do the job. They're going to be most concerned about. And if you're working successfully, actually you probably can be managed. But the thing is, when they see things like you working as a contract attorney, then they think to themselves, does this person really work in a full-time job as an attorney? Or do they want the flexibility that goes along with being an independent contractor and jumping between employers? Are they going to stick around because they've had all these independent contractors part of one group, and are they able to take instruction from a long period of time? So you always, whenever you're looking for a position, you always need to look at things from the law. And so law firms prefer to hire people out of matching environments and not necessarily people that are working as people become contractors for a lot of different points. I that went to Yale Law School and was very smart, worked at my firm. He'd been when I started at my first firm, and then he took and the law firm wanted him to come back as a full-time associate. They gave him a job as a contract attorney, and he stayed with the firm and he worked for the same partners and everything. And had he wanted full-time, probably consider that. But a lot of times, contract attorneys who do it because of flexibility, and you need to work around and see how the law firm is going to respond to that. Let's see. My question is, how much non-attorneys make in big firms? How much do recruiting directors? I have been astonished. I know I talked the other day that was working for a big firm preparing pitches, just basically marketing pitches to for their clients, making $280,000 a year. And that's just, the woman had no, I think she might have gone to college, but she definitely wasn't an attorney. And recruiting directors, the salaries are all over the place. Some recruiting directors can make a lot of money, and they can make as much as attorneys. Some paralegals and law firms that, whether if they're paid by the hour and get overtime, can make as much money as the attorneys. So in big law firms, it's pretty amazing how much many non-attorneys can make. Recruiting assistants, same thing, but I don't know how much they make specifically. It depends on the firm, though. The firms will often pay more than they should, and some will pay less than they should, and some it's in between. And it's really all over the map. But most professionals in large law firms are making anywhere from half to 2/3 of what starting attorneys are making at any point in time. Whatever the starting salary is at any point in time, most non-professionals are making between half and 2/3 of that. And then the more senior ones are making more. And then if they're in the executive suite, meaning they may be like head of HR and stuff like that, then their salaries are typically about 50% of what, or 50% more than a starting attorney. So in general, essential staff, about half to 2/3 what starting attorney does. And that would include recruiting directors, recruiting people. I'm not even gonna say without include, but that's essential staff. And then high level staff, things like HR can make anywhere from, make more. So that's been what I've seen. And law firms have all sorts of people. They have COOs, they have finance, they have all sorts of roles there. So that's been my experience. It depends on the big firm. Some law firms are very cheap. So some law firms will keep the salary of the partners and so forth up by paying the essential staff less. And it really depends. But the point is, the law firms can definitely you can definitely make a lot of money working in a law firm, not essential staff. I know people that are doing in recruiting roles, recruiting directors in large law firms that make, very good livings, like $1,000 a year. Yeah. It just depends on the firm. Suggestions for how to combat a logical issue that was largely firm. Well, the big way to combat, sometimes time is really way to come back. But the more time goes by, the more change and that you may have gotten in trouble with will have left, or you can use references of people that were your friends. The psychological issue caused by your firm and is typically just to find an environment where you believe you're not going to have those issues. So many times that's a firm. It can be in a smaller market. It can be a different practice setting. It could be a different profession sometimes. It just depends. You can definitely come back if you've had psychological issues. In my opinion, the prejudice against psychological issues is definitely over my lifetime. It's no different than having a physical illness where you get sick because of a virus or something. But the only thing you need to be concerned about is how that's framed when you get back. You do not want to talk about the fact you had a psychological issue or a sickness if you can avoid it. Just want to say that I wanted to take time off, I wanted to get recentered, or whatever, and then I think the big thing with any time off is you can always come back. You just can't come back always to where you were. So if you leave like the best firms, it's very difficult to come back to the best firms if you take too much time off. Still come back to a firm that's not as good. So you have to go down a few steps. That's the same thing. Issues. The world can give you another chance, but it's not going to give you a chance. You're going to have to get some credit and build up to the firm you're at before, and then you can do it. And people, recover from all sorts of psychological issues and come back and do very well. But I will also tell you that the firm I was at, there was one guy that's murdering his wife, another for a couple others doing some other bad stuff, and I don't know that you can come back from that. But They were just barred, so there's no way. I'm currently an M&A junior at a Vault 10 firm in New York. I and several of my peers are looking to lateral ASAP out and better opportunities. I appreciate any insight of corporate concept types deal should be experienced or be knowledgeable. Maybe in other words, I'm trying to check the boxes for things are good, well-rounded M&A mid learn before leaving a firm. The big thing is to document all the deals that you work on. So I always recommend that you have a transaction sheet where you keep track of everything you work on. But the best corporate attorneys that they're very proud of the matter worked on, and they write, and that just communicates. Just that communicates a lot. So that should always be your resume and on there. Now, for the most part, law firms are not going to hire you just be if you're looking for a new job doing M&A. They're not going to hire you because of your experience. So that's one of the big mistakes that people make. Believe that having one more type of deal or one more type of thing is going to make them marketable. It's really these questions. Can you do the job? Can you be managed? Will you do the job long term? If you're at a really good firm like that, then you're going to have a lot of options. I would recommend you're probably already getting a lot of calls from headhunters. We don't make those kind of calls because we're a legal placement firm. And so people tend to come to us as opposed to the other way. But I'm sure you're getting a lot of calls right now. I would not really, especially if you're a junior, I would ignore those for at least a couple of years because you need to get a lot more experience. And if you're at a good firm, it does you no good to leave right now. And as a matter of fact, I have, for example, a relative that started at Skadden 2 years ago in New York and doing M&A. And I was very clear with him that you just need to stay there for a long time. You don't want to leave. The more experience you get, the better. And so the more experience you get working at the same firm, the more experience you get is going to show you're going to do the job long term. Wherever you go, it's going to show you can be managed. It's going to show you can do the job. It's going to show, and then after you've been, it's going to show that the firm probably liked you that you're at. And then if you know what you want over time, then you're going to be much better off. But all this burnout and stuff is actually a good thing when you're young because all this stuff is being pushed into your kind of nervous system and your way of thinking about work, and it's just very helpful. So you definitely need to just stick with it, in my opinion, and to be well-rounded. The biggest thing to be well-rounded is to, especially if you're at that good of a firm, it'd be one thing if you were trying to move to a Vault 10 from a Vault 50 firm, or if you're trying to move from a Vault 10 to a 5 or something, but all these things are going to make you really good. The only thing that could really help you, there's different, types of M&A. So some people do M&A in the healthcare field, others do it in finance, like in the merged finance companies. And so if you had a specialty like that, then that would help you. But I think you're probably in pretty good shape where you're at. My advice is to ignore headhunters for a long time and opportunities. And grass, and the advice I'll give you, it's actually a funny story, but sometimes people think that grass is always greener on the other side, and are things are going to be different. And I love the story. My mom told it to me, and she had a friend and married, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. The sixth person was his first wife, and which is very funny. So it's the first person he married was actually, I guess, the 5th person he married. So the 6th time he got married, first wife. And she said, "God, why would you?" And he said, "Because after married for to 5, I realized that everybody is basically the same. You get married and you have the same problems and disagreements, and everything's the same." I don't know if that's true, but interesting because work at a law firm, the problems you have in one firm to be similar and your gripes are going to be similar. They're just going to be, so you don't always need to leave places. They're like the guy that did all those times, and the last time he got married, it was this first person realized that every marriage is always the same. So you don't necessarily need to look at things to be well-rounded. And the burnout's good. The burnout means you're getting really good experience and becoming a much better attorney. And you won't believe how much smarter you are after having that much experience at a firm that's demanding, where you're doing that sort of work compared to other things. I was talking to a girl that was just someone I placed, but she was a corporate attorney at Sullivan and Cromwell, which is a great firm, and she was doing M&A, and then she relocated to the Bay Area where she worked at another firm, and she was very upset when she got there because the there just wasn't the work wasn't as sophisticated, and they weren't doing they weren't as good at what they were doing, and she would take these assignments and they wouldn't give her as much responsibility, and so she felt almost like she was back in training wheels when she'd be running these huge deals at Sullivan Cromwell. So the type of experience you're getting, you may be amazed at what a good attorney you're becoming, and the more of that you get, the better off I think you'll be. Okay, let's see. This is a good question. I love these questions. Thank you for asking such good questions, everyone. That last one was good. The one before was really good. Okay. So let's see. I'm a new litigation associate, and it turns out I hate litigation. I especially hate discovery. Everybody hates discovery, by the way. Constant squabbling. The idea of going to court or taking a deposition makes me want to throw up or faint or both. Okay, that's good. I love research, and that's a good sign. I love research and writing. I'm a great writer, but what kind of attorney jobs are out there that allow my research piggy detail talents without the catfighting parts possible? Give me a good hope for to know if a position like this. Actually, that helps. I see some government jobs now and then they're more advisory, but they all want more experience than I have. And the longer I stay with litigation, the more stuck I'll be. I think the most for you would be to be a research, which we actually have a job company. You have to work here, but I'm not trying to sell you on that. But to be a research, but probably the smartest thing would be for the government. So that's what a judge does. A judge will basically, if you work for a permanent clerk or a district state court judge, you write opinions. That's what they do. And a couple things is all attorneys hate discovery. No one likes discovery. It's just part of the job. So people do not like that. When you're in depositions is something that's scary, but you don't necessarily need. There's attorneys that are partner firms that have maybe only taken ever. And I hate it's true, and have hardly ever go to other people do that. Sounds like you're a very good writer. So and if you like this research and nitpicky detail, again, we have a research attorney job that we're looking for someone to do that, but without catfighting, then and honestly, that what you think about things like work for a judge, you can and appeals to go to. I guess you'd have to argue a panel there, and can do that. Anything to do with writing. There's also a lot of professional brief writers. So there's people that write briefs professionally. So they will do it for different attorneys. They're sourced to writers. There's research attorney jobs in firms. I've talked to numerous research attorneys inside of law, and that's a job. And you can very writing, then you can tell your law firm that I don't like doing and see what happens. I don't know if that's going to go over well, but you could do that. Discovery, part of the whole thing, is really about the fact to be able to write effectively. So you're just trying to get in order to write effectively. So that's that. But yeah, if you're going to court or taking this, throw up something you can probably get over it's just because it's new. You could take trial advocacy classes, and anything that's new like that can be stressful. But yeah, I would recommend being a research attorney. You could work for a judge. You could do appeals. You could be a professional brief writer. You can also go into journalism. So a lot of attorneys like going into journalism. There's a lot of journalists that are attorneys, and we have jobs, of course, for that. In our company, we have a girl that used to be a litigator, Gibson Dunn, that writes letters for us for attorneys. So she writes letters that we send to law firms about how great an attorney is. You can be a writer. You can be an editor, you can work for a magazine or an online news publication, all these sorts of things. But the thing that I would say is if you have really good legal skills though, and you like the research and the writing and the finding the details and then writing about that, then you're probably going to be much better off doing something related to the law as opposed to this other stuff. But if you take a look at a lot of people with good writing and research skills are former attorneys. So like Geraldo Rivera is a former attorney. He's obviously has a news show. The guy that runs TMZ. So TMZ is Harvey Levin or whatever his name is. He started out, I think, as a reporter for Court TV, a reporter for Judge Judy or something like that. And then where he talk about, I think that's what he did. I'm not 100% sure, but he would talk about interview people that came out of court, and then he started a celebrity news magazine. So there's just all sorts of things that you can do if you have writing or research skills and like it. And Harley Levin, by the way, he went to University of Chicago Law School. These are smart people. And another guy, Michael Nedved, he used to be a former. He went to Yale Law School. He was a, I don't know, movie reviewer. You can write books. There's just all sorts of jobs that you can do. You can get into legal placement like we do. Legal placement, what I do is, but it's not necessarily, it's a lot of research and writing. And what I'm doing now is, I guess, talking. So there's just all sorts of positions that someone with those sorts of skills can do. And whatever makes you happiest is really, what you should be doing. But a lot of this stuff, like the discovery, I think is something that discovery is something that no attorney likes, and you just have to clog through. The people that do most of the discovery in law firms tend to be junior attorneys, so they're not always the senior attorneys. You find very few senior attorneys like drafting interrogatories and stuff. You just don't see it. They may look at the choices documents, but they're not going to do that. And you don't find, so that's just something that you learn when you're a junior attorney. And then going to court isn't something you always have to do. And most attorneys, senior attorneys going to court, they would prefer sometimes to send an associate. But if you don't like to court or doing depositions, a lot of these things you probably just don't like because you're afraid of them, because you haven't done them yet. And so anytime you haven't done something, you can be afraid of it. But you could turn out to be really good at this. So a lot of times this stuff is just getting over these different types of fears. Okay, that was a great question, by the way. Thank you. Give me 1 second. Okay, so let me see here. So I'm a new litigation associate, and it turns out I hate litigation. I especially hate discovery and the constant squabble. Oh, wait, no, sorry, I just copied that one. Give me a second here. Tier 14 that's just struck out a big law. For some personal reason, my GPA during OCI reflected a very low number, but it is much. I was slow in the job search, so I'm currently. I'm going to grab the grass a little bit. I'm a 2L at a lower tier 14 that just struck out a big law. For some personal reason, my GPA during OCI reflected a very low number, but it is much higher now. I was slow in the job search, so I'm either doing an in-house position, tech company, possibly a summer clerk position with civil rights litigation firm, possibly a summer clerk position, AmLaw, insurance defense firm. I really wanted to do transaction law, but any position that might place me in a better spot for big law recruiting in my third year. Any thoughts would be beneficial. Also, when should I start networking email recruiters for 3L OCI? Appreciate any advice. Okay, let me just take a look at this. GP is not a big deal. You can always fix that. And it doesn't matter the longer than out. Still on the job search. I'm currently either doing an in-house position, tech company, possibly a summer law clerk position, civil rights litigation firm, or possibly a summer position at a Law 100 insurance defense firm. Okay. Ideally, when you do transactional, I'm trying to get into this in my place in a better spot for big law recruiting in my third year. Okay, so there's a couple of things I would recommend. So it's just like the first person that we spoke to, or that we entered, all right, this person up here that we were talking to, that I gave the answers for. The first thing is wherever you choose to work, it sounds like you're hopefully going to get a good summer associate job, and you'll have one at maybe a civil rights firm or an insurance defense firm or something along those lines. So that's great. But what I would recommend is whatever firm you choose, you want to do the absolute best job possible. Now, a small civil rights litigation firm is probably not going to be as good as working at an AmLaw insurance defense firm. So I definitely would recommend working at a larger insurance defense firm as opposed to a civil rights litigation firm, and as opposed to a small tech company. And here's why. If you work at a small tech company, it's going to look like you didn't want to work in a law firm. And so if you work in a law firm, if you work in a tech company, people are going to think you're not interested in working in a law firm at all, and that's just not smart. So especially if it's a small tech company, they're not going to be able to teach you much about practicing law, and so that's also not good. So you need to be very careful about that. So I just wouldn't recommend that. The civil rights litigation firm, like law firms, are businesses, and so law firms hire people to work in them because they're businesses. And what a business needs is a business wants someone that is able that basically works for businesses. And if you're working in a civil rights litigation firm, I don't know if you're defending civil rights claims or but it's about civil rights. And big law firms are about business. And so insurance defense, if you get a job at a large insurance defense firm, that's great. That's fantastic. I don't know what the name of the firm is, but it's insurance defense. that's fine too. You can certainly transition out of that at some point, but that's great that you were able to hopefully get one of these jobs. These are the ones I would choose between. My first choice would be the insurance defense firm. My second choice would be the civil rights litigation firm. And my third choice would be the tech company. So that's how I would think about those opportunities. And then the other thing is that in terms of transactional law, I don't know why you're necessarily interested in transactional law, but if you are, then you're going to need to hopefully try to get a position doing that somewhere. And I don't know how to advise you to do that, but you do want to do the absolute best you can working in an insurance defense firm and really just give it your all. And get as much experience as you can, learn about it as much as you can. And unfortunately, if that's all you get, then you're going to have to transition later on and do something else. But I had the same advice as I had for the previous person, and that is to do a good job as a summer associate and to do the best job you can. Then also to get as much experience as you can as a summer associate, because you're going to be practicing for a long time. And then also, if you can, to do a federal clerkship, and then also to interview as a 3L. Now, if you do a federal clerkship, that's really going to set you up to be doing litigation. So you do want to interview as a 3L as much as you can and try to do that. I would also recommend probably looking at a lot of smaller markets if you're looking for a corporate job, and do what you can with that. Right now, corporate is such in demand that the more experience that you get, the better off you're going to be. So and it's going to be actually fairly easy, probably easier than it was in the past to get a corporate job as a 3L. And so I would just keep doing that. And you will still be able to get interviews as a 3L. If you're at a good top 25 law school, you still can do it. And frankly, corporate is very marketable right now. So if you're able to get a job at a small corporate firm, you will be able to move to a larger firm later. But never think in terms of that something is a stepping stone. Go into there and just give it your all and do the best you can. And then later, you can always move as well. I hope that helps. Difficult to trying to change market after a 6 to 7 month hiatus and trying to stay in a larger market. It seems that they wouldn't be keen on moving expenses if the last job wasn't with a large firm. Then they would be less likely to take a gamble on someone from farther away. Because I'm assuming what you mean is that you're trying to switch markets and change markets. Is it more difficult? You've taken 6 to 7 months off, and you want to know if it's more difficult to change markets than it is to stay in a larger market. Okay, so I would think that in the larger market, you can certainly apply to places there. The only issue I would have with a larger market is that if you try to work in a larger market, then it may be a little bit more difficult for you, just because there's going to be obviously more people competing for the same job. So the only thing I would say about that is that if you're trying to stay in a larger market, then you may not be able to work at the same caliber firms you were working at when you were in the larger market before. That's all. And then in terms of the 6 to 7 month hiatus and then trying to move to a smaller market, you're right that firms wouldn't be keen to be paying moving expenses. Some of the firms pay moving expenses and will expect you to pay it. And most law firms are going to be unwilling to take a gamble on you. That's correct. If you don't have a very rare experience, if you're not moving home and that sort of thing. So I would think it would be easier for you to get a job in your existing market if you're not coming from a top firm, but probably not as good of a firm as you were at before. And you may get a better job depending on how active your practice area is. But that would be my thought. Question is, let's see here. Are law firms taking coronavirus into consideration in the 6 to 7 month unemployment stints right now? Yes, they are. So it's definitely much easier than it was before to get positions if you're unemployed because of the coronavirus. But the only problem right now is the economy is actually doing very well and there's lots of jobs. Because the economy is doing so well, then law firms are going to be asking themselves why you can't find a job, because there are right now lots of jobs available. There were at the beginning of the coronavirus, there were a lot of cutbacks, but that's stopped. So it's not something you need to worry about at the moment. It is something you need to worry about. So they're taking into consideration, but I think that because the market's so good, that's not really a valid excuse at the point. I'm being considered for an in-house counsel job. I'm afraid to continue my candidacy given what you shared about the legal review skills and motivation of those that occupy in-house positions. I can't say the position is my dream job, but it does pay more than $40,000 previously. If I were to remain in my present firm as a contractor whilst working in-house, that could stave off the negative thoughts firm. Would that help stave off the negative thoughts firm having a cancer to say go back into a law environment? Okay, so I don't know what you're doing as a contractor, but the problem with even so again, this is talking about the $40,000. The biggest thing that attorneys need to be concerned about when they're working is long-term access to work. So that's really the most important thing. Law firms need to have access to work over an extended period of time. You need to have access to work over an extended period of time. So that's something that all attorneys should do. So you should always do whatever you can to make sure you have long-term access to work. And so what that means is that means that you want to make sure that you're being given work by people, that you're in a place where you're constantly getting work and where you're not going to have periods of not having work. The problem with going in-house is that there tends not to be stability, because if you go in-house, what'll happen is the law firms go out of business, companies go out of business, companies change management, companies shuffle people around their legal departments, companies give their best work to outside counsel. So it's not, and your legal skills often do deteriorate. People that go in-house become experts in giving work to others. They're not necessarily experts in doing the work themselves over time. So those are some of the kind of the major problems. My thoughts in terms of whatever you're doing is that if you're in a law firm, you say you're a contractor. So I'm saying if I were to remain in my present firm as a contractor while working in-house. No, I don't think you should remain in your present firm as a contractor. I think you should either go in-house and do that job as well as you can, or that, and leave it at that. So that's how I would approach that. I wouldn't try to do both things. Because if you try to do two things at the same time, you're just not going to do either of them very well. So you either need to go in-house and commit and do the best you can, or doing something else. Okay, so the next question here. So currently a first year at a mid-sized healthcare firm on Long Island. What can I do in addition to working hard and as often as I can to make myself more marketable to firms in New York City with a robust healthcare practice? Well, that's great. I think that having that experience, I think you're probably definitely marketable. I think you'll be marketable in firms in New York, without a doubt. I don't think the healthcare is a really good practice area. I think what I recommend to healthcare, and I place attorneys from healthcare firms in large law firms all the time, and I have people interviewing in your situation all the time, pretty much every week, and that sort of thing. There's people interviewing with that I have that are interviewing with large law firms, and that are coming from mid-sized firms, or even smaller firms. The only thing I would recommend is stay with your firm, try to develop an expertise, and just continue doing what you're doing and getting your experience. And then as law firms have openings, just apply to them. The nice thing about healthcare is there's not a lot of healthcare attorneys out there. You're very marketable and you have very good skills. You're going to be able to, if you keep doing that. And it's not even that important where you went to law school and how you did and all that stuff. It's just the more experience you get, the better off you'll be, and you will get something eventually. And I would just, as you see openings, I would apply to them. And then also, there's also like a healthcare boutiques in New York City and so forth that you can apply to. So you should be fine. I would just keep your eye in the market. You can use Law Crossing, which is a good site for that, or you can use a recruiter. It doesn't matter, but you should definitely continue doing what you're doing, not switch firms, probably stay where you're at, get as much experience as you can. Let's see here. Thank you so much for answering my question about the small law firm summer associate job. You're right, and I'm absolutely grateful. Is it wrong for me to look into greener pastures as far as trying to get into a major law firm? Also, your presentation last week was small law firm summer associate job with a large law firm, still a flaw that could hold me back from getting one of the major firms. Thanks so much. Okay, so there's nothing wrong to be looking for greener pastures, and frankly, that's exactly what law firms want to see. Law firms love it when people start out at smaller firms and then try to get into bigger firms later on. So and when you start out at a smaller law firm and you work hard and you're hungry and you want to work in a bigger law firm and you're enthusiastic, what happens is a lot of people get into big law firms right out of law school. And then and we've seen these questions already today. And those same people then are suddenly very excited about moving later on. So over time, if you're working in a smaller law firm and then you try to get into a bigger law firm, you actually become a very attractive candidate. My My advice is to get the very best grades that you can for the rest of law school, and to get the best experience you can. And you can always get into a major firm. All sorts of people start out in small firms and jobs they don't want, and they become very attractive candidates to large law firms later on because they stick with it and they're enthusiastic. And the reason law firms love people coming from smaller law firms, big law firms, is because what happens is someone goes to a major law firm out of law school, and then the whole class of kind of associates there loses their enthusiasm over a couple of years. After lots of hard work and stuff, the morale kind of suffers. And so the law firms love bringing in people from smaller law firms that are just all fired up and enthusiastic about working there. And so that is one of the reasons why starting in a law firm can actually benefit you. And then it can also make you appreciate what you have when you get into a large law firm later on. And I think so that's also a very positive thing, and can help you quite a bit. That's something I recommend. So lots of people start off in smaller firms and then move up. And the people actually that move up from smaller firms into larger law firms typically end up doing better. And when you work in a smaller law firm too, you often see how they're able to generate business and all sorts of things when you get into a large law firm, when you get into a large law firm, and you have skills that you may not have had otherwise. So it can be very helpful. And it's something that starting out in a small law firm actually may be a blessing for you in many respects, because then you appreciate what you have later. You have something to look forward to. You have enthusiasm. You are learning. You watch how they're getting business in a smaller law firm, and you bring those skills to a bigger firm. Okay, I'm a highly skilled patent prosecutor and been wondering whether to quit the legal profession and go back to the tech industry to be on the business tech side. An interviewer who recommended to offer me a job I took did not even advise me in confidence to keep open the option of going back to the tech career during that interview. Maybe they know my tech background is exceptionally strong, but who knows why that advice was offered. Maybe they know my tech background is strong, but during some transition stage of my patent law career, I was invited a few times by a friend to apply for tech jobs. And let's just say the strong patent protection in the tech industry has been diminishing for decades, which is why patent law is not that attractive or challenging anymore. Whether to finish my law school is also on the table. What questions should I be asking myself and my mentors regarding my next steps? Okay, let me just see. Okay, so a couple things. So a lot of attorneys, this is a good question, and it's one of the reasons that a lot of times people want to go in-house. So going in the business tech side, some people enjoy that a lot more than being an attorney. And the business tech side means that you're basically making business decisions and you're not so much practicing law, and you're using your legal knowledge to do things, but you're not necessarily practicing law anymore. So that's something that to think about. So one of the things I would say is if you're a highly skilled patent prosecutor, a lot of times it's also patent prosecutors don't always like to stick with patent prosecution because it's very highly technical. It just takes a lot of thought, and it's not and it's just not the same skills as the business tech side. So if it was me, what I would think about is really what you like better and what you think you would like better. I would definitely finish law school because I think that would be a real mistake not to do that. And I would also not get distracted. There's what's called the bright, shiny object syndrome. And what that means is that people get distracted by bright, shiny objects all the time. And you don't want to be distracted by bright, shiny objects when you're searching for a job or when you're trying to finish law school. You should probably go into a law firm and try to practice there for a few years before you do anything else. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And then after doing that, then you can make a decision of whether to go to the business tech side. You don't have enough knowledge of what it's like practicing law. And you also, maybe as a patent prosecutor, I guess you would have some information about it, but you don't really have enough experience to do that yet. One other thing I would say is that if you become a patent prosecutor, that's a lifetime profession. And as a patent attorney, which as opposed to a patent prosecutor, that's something you can do your entire career. And you can bring in clients, and you can frankly probably make a much better living than you would just being a patent attorney. And it says here you've been doing it for 10 years. Yeah, so I guess it sounds like you have a lot of understanding. If it was me, I would complete my law degree. And then once I did that, I would decide if I want to go on the business tech side. The only problem with the business tech side is when you do that, what is the stability of whatever job you take or whatever company you join. And that's just something to really be concerned about, that you need to think about, because in many cases you could have a lot more employment stability as a patent prosecutor than you could potentially as a working in the business tech side. I place patent prosecutors all the time. It's very rare for a patent prosecutor to be unemployed for a long period of time, and even in bad economies. Last question. These are great questions. I'm a graduating 3L and have two competing offers. I'm not certain which one to accept. The first offer is the AmLaw 100 law firm in general commercial litigation. I summered there and the firm is great. The other offer is a mid-sized healthcare law firm in their healthcare operations practice group. The firm does sophisticated work in healthcare and is actually offering a higher salary. Which offer is best? My opinion is probably the healthcare opening, and almost certainly the healthcare opening. The reason is you just and I don't know what you like more, but you have to think about the law of supply and demand. And there's more you can on your resume, by the way, you put summer associate, you just put offer extended, and there you go. Then people know you got an offer, and then you have that AmLaw 100 law firm on your resume, and so people know you were able to get a job there. And then you show that you chose healthcare. So I like healthcare better for you, just because I don't know you, but healthcare is always marketable. I think I've never seen healthcare attorneys have too much of a problem finding a position. So that's just the way it goes. And it's much easier to get a job as a healthcare than it is to get a position as a litigator. Litigators, the problem with litigators is there's just too many litigators. There's more than half the attorneys out there are litigators. And because there's so many litigators, there's all these reasons that law firms find and have for disqualifying litigators, especially in major markets. Like major litigators in major markets are extremely difficult to get jobs for. Right now, in certain markets in the United States, litigators are pretty much unemployable. But healthcare attorneys, I've never actually seen a time when a healthcare attorney has a problem getting a job. The other thing too is if you want to go in-house, it's much easier to get jobs in-house as a healthcare attorney. It's much easier to all those sorts of things. I would choose healthcare if it was me. Okay, well, these are great questions, guys. Thank you, and ladies, for asking all these questions this week. And again, we do this call every week at the same time, and we'll do it next week as well. And then we also I do a call for law firms tomorrow at the same time every week, and we'll post that in the chat. But you're welcome to come to that as well and ask questions, because that's also always a fun presentation. So thank you, everyone. Bye.